time, Ethan. I love muzzleloading. Today we're talking with Chris Laubach about his history in muzzleloading, about what it was like to grow up with your father as an apprentice to Wallace Gusler, and how that led him to today, where he's working on developing his own line of modern manufactured flintlocks and other muzzleloading accoutrements. Chris, thank you again for being a part of the program. Hello?
Ethan.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Oh, busy.
You're very brave taking this on before the week of a show, I guess, I should say.
Yeah, well, it's all good. There's lots that we're working on, and we'll get into all of this. There's tons of photographs. You know, I'm 55, so I'm kind of, you know, I guess I'm in that era where, okay, you know, you're part of the technology group, but yet I'm still kind of old school, I guess, if that makes sense. So, yeah. You know, I'm a one-man band. A lot's changed. You know, this whole side business, you know, that I've been kind of kicking the can down the road, I guess, is the best way to describe it. You know, kind of until I retired, and then the intention was, you know, okay, we'll grow it, and you know, when that happens, well, some life changes have happened, and we've kind of decided, well, you know, now's a good time to invest some time and money into the business and grow it into whatever it can be. So
awesome. I
grew up in this industry. My dad was John Laubach. He was in the gun shop from 1970 until either late 90s or early 2000s. I don't remember when he actually left the shop.
Shop at Williamsburg, right?
Yes, that's correct. Connie Williamsburg gun shop. And so I grew up all around this stuff. I learned from him and Wallace. I did a lot of work for Wallace Gusler. You know, I was 14, 15, 16 years old. I was doing a lot of work for Wallace. And so I kind of grew up into this, and you know, whether I wanted to or not, it was part of life.
Yeah,
so,
you're kind of stuck. You know, I understand that.
Exactly. Exactly. So, and you know, I started building, you know, really high-end muzzle loaders for customers, and you know, what we had available were the cast locks, and you know, you could weld them up and reshape them, and or just make a whole new lock, or you know, there's things you could do, but at the end of the day, it just, the quality was still a cast lock. And so I wanted to bring out some different style locks to the market as well. And so we had this 1740s Germanic lock that I had modeled in CAD I own the original. And it was pretty much almost ready to go, because a lot of people were like, well, why was that your first one to bring out? And I'm like, well, it was ready. You know, it was there. And, you know, we shopped around and looked around and trying to find some CNC houses that would be willing to take on a project like this. And it was tough. I'm not going to lie. It was, you know, the beauty of CNC is high volume. Yeah. You know, you do the high volume and the tolerancing, and but you know, with our industry, this cottage industry is, you know, you it's not that big, you know, so
there's a lot of other industries vying for that machine time and that tool time.
Exactly.
A lot of times, would you say those shops are more familiar with some of this other stuff that's out there, or do they care what they're cutting?
You know, that 5 or 6 years ago, actually 7 years ago, when we were venturing out, you know, to find, I bet I sent it to 15 or 16 different CNC housings, and to be honest, the cost was I was just like, there's just no way that this is, you know, there's no way. I mean, so then I started to go down the avenue. Okay, maybe I just use the modern technology to create a better lock, but yet still a cast lock. So I looked at, you know, because I had the the lock in the 3D CAD format, so I could scale it up. I could do things to it. So I used 3D printing. This was, like I said, this was 5-6 years ago, and I was able to. Actually, what I did was I bought the aluminum blocks, and I drilled them and put indicator pins on them so that you had an A side and a B side, and I was going to move forward with casting, and started to actually print some parts out of metal. There was a company, I don't remember off the top of my head, but there was a company up in Canada that at the time was doing 3D printing with metal. So, I could scale it up by 3%, which is roughly, I think it's like 2.5 to 3% shrink factor when you're casting. So, we started down that road. I thought, okay, well, I'll just, make molds, and I'll be able to scale them up. And so we actually started down that road, and, it kind of morphed. I met a guy locally who ran a 5-axis mill in his day job, and he wanted to go out on his own, and he did have a 3-axis mill in his garage. And, we kind of met up, and I showed him what I wanted to do. And he said, oh, I can, we can definitely do that. And the rest is history, as they say. So, he's my guy. He now has, 4 Haas milling stations, 5-axis milling stations. 2 of them are driven by a robot. And so, he's able to load, my parts and cut them, overnight or when there's some downtime. So that's huge. And that allows us, to bring the cost into, an area that it's not horrible. We did, like I said, 5 or 6 years ago, we brought the first one out. It was, we did, the lock plate, the cock, everything was 4140 from Molly Steel, which is absolute overkill.
It's really tough stuff.
It was just absolute overkill. So we're doing another batch. We're running 250 right now of that same lock, and we have gone with a lesser low carbon steel, which actually is probably better because it would allow people to case harden it, and you can case harden 4140, but it's the originals were wrought iron and they were case hardened. So a low carbon steel is still light years ahead of the wrought iron. So it's plenty for what the use is. But what that did is it allowed us to keep the cost pretty much what it was 5-6 years ago. So it did go up. There are 375, and that was basically the springs and also a little bit of material costs. So it did go up a little bit, but $10 over 6 years is not horrible.
Yeah, that's a pill you can swallow.
Exactly. So we did go back. We changed some of the parts. I guess they would call it design for manufacturing, and I could give you one of the old locks, and I could give you the new lock side by side, and I could actually show you what we changed, and you still wouldn't see it. It's that minor. It's just using cutters that are standard diameters or standard cutters or things of that nature.
Okay.
We did on the first run, we stayed pretty true to the original lock. The original lock did not have a bead all the way around it, so we didn't do that, or molding or bead, whatever you want to call it. The cock did, and so that's like I said, I kind of followed suit. Now we changed it. We took that bead off so that the molding on the cock now matches the molding on the plate, and it looks much better. But my biggest concern when I first brought these out is people saying, oh, well, this isn't right or that's not right, and so I wanted to stay true to the original
Mm-hmm.
to the original lock. And now we had it, we brought it out, and at first, like I was saying earlier, there was a lot of pushback, and obviously cost, and as the years have progressed, and locks now are even the main suppliers for the market, I think we're like $45, and and those locks I know are in the process of transitioning over to CNC, but are still utilizing some castings, and that's fine. By not using the castings, the finish that our locks come with is far superior. It's they come right off of the mill. The guy is able to cut them, and you could probably I've polished a few of them, and it's no time at all. And that's huge, as being a builder, that's time is money, as they say. Mm-hmm. So, that was really good. So we're really happy with what we've been able to accomplish in that realm.
Let me take us back, but
sure.
How did we get here for you, Chris?
So, I grew up in Williamsburg, actually in Colonial Williamsburg. We lived in one of the houses that was it was not a historical house, but it was owned by Colonial Williamsburg. And, growing up around this stuff. And then I've always been, when I graduated high school, I went to college through at night, I worked during the day. And when I was in high school, I had gotten into some of the engineering vo-tech classes, and so that was the route that I went down. I went down the engineering route, and it was I had gotten a job, and then had gotten laid off, and then I moved to Pennsylvania, and I went to work for a company. They had a program. It was not a tool and die apprenticeship, but it was a 12-month program that would teach you how to run a Bridgeport, the milling machine, to run a milling machine, to learn how to do different types of grinding for dies, progressive dies for stamping, and I did that, and I was in the manufacturing world for probably about 3 years, and I just wanted to get back into the engineering side of things, and so I had taken a designer position, and I worked with this company for about 5 years, and then they got bought, and during that buyout in Harrisburg area, about almost 4,000 people got let go. So I was one of them, and I was very fortunate because, like, within 2 weeks, I went to go work for another company as a designer, and unfortunately, that company was about an hour and 45 minutes away. Oof, so I was driving, 3 hours a day just to go to work. Yeah. And so, long story short, this other company that I was laid off from had called me back, and I went back to them, as a designer. And then 5 years later, they had another layoff. So, I guess it was about probably 2 months, and I went to go work for a company which was a competitor, and I started with them as a designer. And then about probably 2 to 3 years into that role, I was promoted to a senior designer, and basically I was doing a lot of product development type work. Okay. So, it was developing product, and so I did that for 18 years with that company, and then was laid off. They had a layoff back in July. And so that's when I finally decided, what, I don't, my wife said to me, what, maybe it's time to just invest in the business. And, the business was there, and we were making parts for Colonial Williamsburg, things that they sell in their stores. The Williamsburg Forge, people always ask me, I'll make a posting on Facebook or something, and somebody will have something to say like, well, that's not, they think we're affiliated with Colonial Williamsburg, and I have to tell them that no, there's no, my father started Williamsburg Forge, and when he passed away, I took the business over, and that's really the only connection to Colonial Williamsburg. So,
so was this July then of 25, where this last? Okay.
Yep.
So for 18 years before then, you're working at the same company.
Yes. Well, actually, almost 20 years I was with
almost 20 years. Okay.
Yep. So.
Wow. So you were kind of, it sounds like then a lot of the up and down there was kind of the early 2000s with a lot of the shifts that were happening there with manufacturing. Yep. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And that just kind of gets me a timeline, I guess, in my own head.
Yeah. And I'd always been, I think I built my first rifle with the aid of my father. I think I was 14.
Okay.
And then I built my next one at 16, and so on and so forth. And then he always told me, he's like, if you, as far as like building guns, he's like, if you enjoy it, he's like, I don't recommend you do it as a full-time job. And of course some people agree and some people don't, but I always kind of heeded that warning, but my day job and my hobby, they kind of mixed, and I used the engineering stuff, when I reverse engineered the original lock, and we had a 3D printer, and so that was new technology that I was able to use with that lock. And so by the time that we even started to cut steel for that lock, it was all proven, other than the spring forces. And so that was really, really helpful. And so we did get a 3D printer here. My own, I got it, I guess it was last year. We've gotten a lot of stuff. We've gotten a lot of different things, software. I'm trying to learn the CAM side of things, the computer aided manufacturing side of things. I've been in CAD all of my life, 3D CAD and using that, and then also with the analysis tools, the ANSYS tools, when for the springs, things like that. I could find all of that stuff, but I've never used or learned or wrote G code, which is now something that I'm getting more involved with. So there's a big learning curve with that. AI is helping, but I don't know that I would rely completely on that. But actually, I'm not using it at all. The guy who has been helping me with some of the CAM has been, I guess, introducing me to some of the options or some of the things that some of the softwares are putting in, the AIs that they're putting.
Oh, okay.
They're building into their platforms, and so
gotcha.
I don't know how helpful they would be right now, because I think a lot of this is in the beginning stages. But for me, the CAM is probably the most difficult, just probably because I haven't used it. So so I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds like you're in as far as like learning this new like, it's not necessarily a software system, but learning this new skill set. I guess you're bouncing things back and forth and trying to translate what you're thinking to maybe what the computer is, what the software is asking for. Does that make sense? So with the CAM, it's called G code, and the G code is what the computer or the machine will follow. It's the tool path. It's what you could think of it as, you start with a block of wood, and the human takes a chisel and starts cutting the block until the stock starts to come, takes shape or emerge out of that said block. So that, that we don't think of it that way, but it's similar that, that's the tool path. That's, what, it's all of that excess material has to be removed. So what the cam is doing is it's basically, you're telling the computer. So the 3D CAD file is the item that you want to make. So, when you write or when you start all of this, you have to align it in space, and then it's going to basically create an imaginary block of material that's around the part. And so then what happens is the machine will then figure out, okay, there's different tooling that you're going to use. There's speed rates, speeds and feeds, as to how fast you're going to remove the material, and different tooling, to remove the material. And then there's step over. So when you cut, you're cutting, and people may vary. Sometimes it's a 10% step over, so that you get a good clean surface when you're finished. You don't have, a bunch of ridges. So it's just basically, learning to tell the computer what it is that you want. So that's what I'm in the process of learning right now. And so that we can move forward with even more products.
Right.
So, but lots to learn.
What is it like being somebody that, grew up in, one of the most, or I guess around, I should say, one of the most traditionally foundational, I don't know, like learning centers and art forms at Williamsburg? What is it like having that background and then trying to get the computer to make the cut that you know how to make? Is that frustrating at times?
It was very frustrating in the beginning.
Okay.
And it kind of goes back to what I was saying. Like there's a gentleman that is trying to bring one of the current locks, cast locks, into the CNC world. And so, with the cock and the frizzen, those parts are, I do all of those modeling in surfacing, because I can keep the flow of, to make it the way it should look. It's not, really like a rigid block, or,
it's an organic shape.
Exactly. And so that's, those are probably the most difficult parts. Everything else is pretty much, the plate. It's you draw the profile and you extrude it, and you put a chamfer on it, and for the most part, I mean, I'm simplifying it, but but there's your lock, your lock plate. So, and even the pan, it's relatively an easy part, but the frizzen is not too bad, but the cock is, there's not a lot of flat spots on the cock, so it has its challenges. But that's the most difficult part, is to get it right, and then to machine it, and then to have it, so that it is organic, like you were saying, it flows. So, but you have access to a lot of items that I wouldn't normally have access to. Wallace has been great. Gary, before Gary passed away, he was another avenue. And of course my dad, and and then obviously all of the people that were friends, and it just keeps branching out, and so it's a wealth of knowledge. It's just amazing. So, but
have you always felt like you had access to that knowledge, growing up in it and being a part of that community? Is that something that you always respected, or did you have kind of a rebellious push away from it before you came back into it?
I never went away from it. I would say that, I probably, like any teenage boy growing up, dad wasn't as smart, when you were growing up as he became when you got older.
Yeah. And not a whole lot of time passed, but dads always get real smart.
Right.
In that time, Yeah. That's what I've always been told. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot of truth to that. And, so there was a time period in there that I've always had an interest, and, I've always had an interest in history. and antiques, clocks, furniture, firearms, and they're all, they're kind of all intertwined, really. But I never rebelled. I guess, well, I shouldn't say I didn't rebel. My rebellion was, I went to do work for Wallace, or if I needed any help, I went to Wallace, and that was just, that's that young, dumb kid, and Wallace was always very helpful. He never, I never got turned away or and even when I moved up here, I guess that would have been 94, probably 95, 96, 97. I was building guns for Wallace in the white. And then it just got to the point where my orders were too much, and I couldn't do that anymore. So,
wow.
But, yeah, and I've quit taking orders probably the last 2 years. I haven't taken any orders because it's just been so busy. And then, and then this happened, and now I'm I want to focus on the locks and some other projects that we have. So.
Ethan here, really quick, just wanted to say that if you're enjoying this conversation, you would probably enjoy the Kalamazoo Living History Show coming up March 21st and 22nd, 2026 at the Kalamazoo County Expo Center in Kalamazoo, Michigan. This is the 50th year for the Kalamazoo Living History Show, and it's my wife and I's first year at the helm. We acquired the show last year and are looking to be good stewards, working with Rick and Leslie Conwell, the previous owners, to continue the show into the future. The show is one of the largest indoor living history shows in the country. We've got over 800 tables, over 200 vendors, artists, and craftsmen. It's a 2-day event that's just a microcosm, a hub, almost like a living history convention of anything pre-1890. So even if you're not interested in specifically the 18th century, it's a common topic here on the program. If you're interested in the 15th, 14th century, if you're interested in the 19th century, where a lot of history is happening, it's all covered at the Kalamazoo Living History Show. I encourage you to check it out. You can stop by for 1 day or get a 2-day pass and come back both days. You won't be disappointed. You can learn more at KalamazooLivingHistoryShow.com.
My goal for 2026 is to bring out 4 more locks.
Oh, wow.
Yep. I have on loan to me, it's a copy of an original American rifle, and the lock is complete. It's all original, hasn't been converted, and that the CAD files for that lock have been sent to our CNC vendor, and so he is currently working on those to create the prototype for that lock. There's another lock that we're bringing out that is a copy. I shouldn't say it's a copy. I would say it's heavily influenced by a lock that my father made while he was in the gun shop at Colonial Williamsburg. And the beauty of this lock is that there's actually 2 guns in the Moravian books, volumes 1 and 2. There's 2 different rifles in there, which are American guns. And the locks that are on those guns are very similar stylistically to this lock. So that would give anybody a lock that you would use, a typical, basically, for lack of a better term, a Seiler lock, or, a German import lock of 1770s, 1780s. You could also use this other lock on it. So I think that will be met with a lot of welcome, given something that's totally different and, will fit the bill for any build pretty much that you could use, that other style on.
So it's a common era, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but a common era, but a different design, different look.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yep. And that one, we've kind of held that one close to our vest. We have outed the other lock, the one that's a copy of the one that's on from the original rifle, and here shortly, I am currently working on my website. Social media, the guys are always riding me because I don't have website up and running. But, I ask people, look, be patient.
Yeah.
We have a lot going on. I mean, it's crazy. It is just crazy.
Running a business is not easy.
No, it's not. And this is in this year, like I said, we want to, by 2026, the end of 2026, we want to be able to be taking orders and to be starting to ship locks. Each lock will come online, and we'll do pre-orders for them, and then hopefully they'll be able to grow and to a point where we'll actually be able to have them in inventory. But that will come in time. All of our locks obviously are CNC'd. The mainsprings, right now we're going to be forging them. The mainsprings will be milled in the flat state, and then we have figured out a way that we can basically just bend, just the area where the bend is, and bend the spring. So
cool.
The main springs will be forged. The frizzen spring and the sear springs, there's just not enough flex or force to where there's any concern with them. They work fine. So those will be milled right in the completed state, and they've been working great. So that helps. With the first round that we made, the frizzen springs, the sear springs, and the main springs were all hand forged. And although I did my best to give the people that were making them fixtures and go no-go gauges and things to make sure that they were all within the parameters, and that just kind of fell apart. So
it can be tough to get that through a pipeline.
Yes. So at the end of the day, I was spending a lot of time fitting, having to fit. So going this way by milling the frizzen spring and the sear spring, that eliminates a lot of that. And then with milling the main springs in the flat state, we'll mill the foot, we'll mill all of the areas that are going to be connected to the plate, and the only thing that we would do is heat just the area and then bend it, and then so they'd all be the same.
Right. So you're not doing any fitting, because your parts that touch other parts are computer matched, basically.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and
clever.
To go back to the prototype, like by the time I send the files to my CNC shop, the geometry is right. Like I have a 3D printer in house, and so I've printed parts, and but you can't, with a 3D printer and plastic, you can't tell if the forces are correct for the springs. So you can get them close, and we've had to probably 2 iterations of the frizzen spring, and I'm basically within 1/4 of a pound of the original lock on the 1740s lock. That's how close we were able to get it. So it's been really a lot of fun, and but they're right. I mean, they are right. There is no, there's not a lot of there's no cleanup work. There's just you just basically put them right on the gun that you're building. So we're definitely looking forward to bringing out these other locks. So we have the Germanic lock is already out, and we're bringing out, like I said, those other 2. Now, what we're really excited about is this other one it's one that, like I said, was inspired by a lock my dad made. So what we've actually decided to do with that lock is we're going to take that lock, and we're in the process of scaling that down to make a pistol lock as well. That's actually I'm not too far from Brad Emig and Shane Emig, and we were having a conversation, and Brad just said, what would be really great is if you took that lock and made a pistol lock out of it. And it was like, I had an epiphany. I'm like, the whole time I'd never thought about, that. And I'm like, you're right. There's that would be perfect. So we're working on that now. I hope to have the 2 locks that I just discussed, and then this pistol lock, to have the prototypes completed and to be ready to be able to take orders within the next 90 days if we can. And a lot of that's going to depend on the CNC vendor's backlog and what he can do. So we will see. But so that would take us up to 4 locks. And then we have a beautiful Fowler that's on loan to us. And I have posted some pictures on our social media of this lock. It is a flat-faced English lock, kind of typical of what you'd see on a Fowler, and it has an external safety. And this is one that we're going to bring out, and we'll let the people decide if it's a lock they want or not. We'll make whatever they want, pretty much.
Yeah.
So that's another one that we're really looking forward to bringing out. It will be a little bit more expensive because it has the external safety, which we've talked to a couple of people, and they all agreed that if you're going to do it, do it the way it is. So that's the intent. So I hope to have that one completed and ready to be taking orders for it by the end of the summer. And then that leaves one other lock that we're kind of not sure about. It's a possibility. It was produced years ago by a gentleman in Canada, John Clark, I think is his name. I own the original lock. The original lock, some call it a John Bales, some call it I'm trying to think of what the other name is, but it would be perfect for, if you wanted to do a double flint Fowler. Mm-hmm. So it's one it's going to be modeled, and we'll probably prototype it. We'll put it out there and see how it's, see what people want, see what they think.
Yeah.
Now, with any of our locks, because this is constantly comes up, on some of the forums and whatnot, we will do left-handed locks. I have absolutely no problems. I've talked to my CNC vendor, and if now, unfortunately, typically you would want to do a 100-piece run.
Yeah.
I've talked to him, and he said, I'll even do a 50-piece run. So any lock that we make, I will, when everything is up and running and completed and we're taking orders, I will somehow figure out how to have a place on the website that we could offer the left-hand lock in a run, and when we get enough people that are committed, then we'll cut left-handed locks. I have absolutely no problems with that. We've tried with the bigger Germanic lock, and that's kind of a specialty lock. It's not a lot of builds that are being done.
Yeah.
Some people like it because you can refile it and use it for an early American. I've done that, on a couple of builds. It works great for that. But right off of the shelf, it's not, the everyday lock that's going to sell, the most.
Right.
And,
it's not one that you're going to have, stacks and stacks of on a shelf because they're going to move. Yeah, exactly.
And with all of these, and this is kind of where we ask people to be patient is, with all of these, keep in mind it's going to take some time to get to where we can keep an inventory. So it's probably going to be, we take pre-orders, and then as soon as we hit 100, then we'll probably run a 500-piece order. But, I have to have that 100, obligated or committed, and then that's when the order gets cut loose.
Yeah.
And eventually I'm sure that, we will get to a point where, you can, we can run them, and have them, in an inventory. But not yet.
It's a lot of leverage to have hanging out there.
It is.
It
is.
For me, it's coffee beans in the coffee shop, but but you start stacking things up there, and especially right now in January when it's cold as all get out outside and people don't want to leave their cars and their houses, that's just
right.
That stuff's sitting there, and
it's so that's the big thing. We do have Ron Scott. I don't know if you're familiar with Ron. He builds really nice Jaeger style rifles on the West Coast, and he has loaned us 2 folding sights, and we actually made a run of the one sight for him, and so we have added that to our list of items that we're going to be offering. And there's a second flip up sight that we're in the process of making now. And so the one sight is definitely for a Jaeger. The one that we just ran that Ron Scott is selling, you can actually cut the front finial off, and it makes a really nice, just a standard rear sight that could be used on an American piece. And then you have that flip up, which gives you a little bit of extra yardage. But so those are 2 extra items that we're also going to be selling. We have some other stuff in the works, but that's on the back burner at the moment. We've got quite a bit to get up and out, to be taking orders, and then we'll move forward with some of the other stuff that we've got planned. But so there's a lot of work has been done, but there's still a ways to go.
Yeah, you've really, I don't know, like monster is not the right word, but you've started to build this engine here that I think continues to want more gas.
Right.
You've got things moving, and it's starting to purr, and there's there's a lot to still put into it, but it sounds like you're excited about it, and there's a lot of passion there, getting this stuff oriented and figured out.
It is, and I think a lot of that comes from the builder side, because it's, you're always going to have, you're always going to have the, the cast parts, and they'll always fill an area. But even a lot of the other lock companies are starting to switch over and have parts CNC'd, and so it's just a better part. And I think that's with anything, if you can get a better part, and that's the way to go. And I think the barrels, I think Jason, I'm not 100% sure, but I think even his stuff is being cut on a CNC machine.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Down there at Rice Barrel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think the vast majority of his stuff is CNC now.
Yeah.
When it comes to the parts and casting, do you think this shift, and I could be mistaken, but I've heard in probably the last 5-6 years that time in a casting facility has gotten harder and harder to get with the quantities that muzzleloading is doing. Do you think that factors into it at all, or do you think this is kind of a natural progression?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't. When I went down this road, I did veer away from the castings because I wanted to have a product that basically didn't have that bead blast finish.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to have a part that, the plate on our lock, it came to the customers with roughly a 400 grit polish. And then the conch surface, which was that same surface, basically that paralleled the lock plate, that surface was also, polished to a 400 grit. And that's how they came to the customer.
Wow.
So I thought about, casting the conch and then, the frizzen, because those are the 2 most expensive parts to have machined. And, then I thought, okay, well, if I go that route, then what do I do about, the top jaw and the plate and the pan, those parts. would then have to be bead blasted, and then I just
Yeah.
I didn't want to do that, and I'm glad that I didn't. I know that there are some locks being produced that those are the way they're done, and that's fine. I just didn't want to go that route, and we did have a little bit of a time trying to source material to make the frisons, because you're doing a stock removal, so it's a big chunk that you're starting with, and we've since toyed around with some different materials, and we did find a tool steel that we really liked, and we hardened it, tempered it, and put a lock together, and actually did a slow motion video. We posted that online, and I was really surprised with how well it sparked. It was far better than I could have ever imagined. So that makes it easy on us, because the first round, we went with a low carbon steel, and we carburized the frisons on the first ones, and we did a lot of experimenting. A gentleman by the name of Larry Maroc, who was an earlier builder. He was big in the probably late 70s and 80s and maybe even early 90s. And he used to be a metallurgist for one of the companies that makes weapons for the government. And so he was a big help 6 years ago when we were going through all this stuff. And we took some material that we ended up making the frisons out of, and I was carburizing them, and we had to work up this the time and the temperature and how long we hold them. And
there's almost a recipe to that, to get what you want out of it. It
kind of is, and we had Wallace, we had Larry, and a couple of other, Brad Emig, and we came up with kind of this recipe, and I took some of the pieces into work. I had cut them in half, and we had a microscope at work that was phenomenal, and you could see where how far of carbon penetration we were getting, and we were getting over 60 thousandths of carbon penetration.
Oh goodness.
So, if you shot that much off of your frizzen, it's time for a new frizzen. I don't care whose lock you have.
Also, I want to know what your career is and how you can shoot that much, because that's the business I want to be in.
Exactly. So we were really pleased with the way that sparked. The sparks were really big, fluffy sparks. Kind of, that was my goal, when I was talking with Wallace and Larry, is, I wanted to be able to reproduce, the way, a wrought iron frizzen would spark. You get these big fluffy sparks that they spark, and then they go, and then they explode.
Yeah.
And
they kind of float there for some time.
Yeah. We actually have a video. It's on YouTube. Of the prototype lock that we had built, and the sparks, they literally go to the carpet, and that was pretty impressive. So, but there was a lot of time. There's so much engineering time that went into just learning, the different metallurgists and metallurgy and different things, that I'm not gonna say I took for granted, but you just didn't really think too much about. And but it's been a long road, and now we can offer a superior product, and the price is pretty competitive for what the customer is getting. It's so we're really excited to be bringing out 4 or 5 more locks this year, and we'll see where this business goes. Sky's the limit.
Right.
So
is it pretty nerve-wracking? You're still within kind of your first year of your wife saying it's time to do this business.
Yeah, it's nerve-wracking. there's a lot. I said to her the other night, I'm like, I work more hours now than I've ever worked. And,
Yeah.
I think that probably the most nerve wracking thing, and I just said this to her today, is I feel like there's been so much effort, so much time, everything put in, and it's like there's hardly anything to sell.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like now, I told her I had this conversation. I said, I'm not worried like next year, there's hours and hours and hours put into developing a lock. And part of the reason why we can do what we want to do this year is because for the last 7 years, I've been modeling locks. I have a library of, 3D modeled original locks that I've just been over the years. Because I didn't know when or if at all, would this happen, and now it's happened. So
you've kind of front loaded your production where that development end is done, and now you can take it to its next step. Okay, so now I'm understanding how you've got 4 in the queue here, getting ready to go, because the pre-production is there. And now you're figuring out the metallurgy and the tool time. Okay, I'm picking it up now.
Yep. So it's there's been a lot of work that's been going on, and I just talked to the CNC supplier, and what we're trying to figure out is okay, if this does take off, how do we prepare for that, or fill that bill?
How do you scale that?
Exactly. Because he's been running the 250 piece run that we're doing now, and people see it. I post it up. I've been pretty transparent about everything that's going on, and I've had people say, well, this is taking a while, and I'm like, well, yeah, it has. It has, and there's a plan for all that to change if need be. So he's prepared to ramp up, if this takes off, and we have some ideas, so we'll let the customer base decide, how we respond, and so that's pretty exciting. We'll see how it goes. So and there's the more that we make, the less I have to what's the word? The less not responsibility. The less I'll have to do. I'll have to hand off to somebody else. For instance, heat treating. I do all that in house right now.
Right.
If I'm making, I don't know, hundreds of locks, I don't necessarily know that I'm going to have that time.
Right.
My time is probably better off, engineering the next product, whatever that may be. And so, we've reached out to a couple of places, and, so we have contingency plans or things that we're setting up in the event that, okay, this takes off, and it's going to be popular, and it's going to grow. And so we have ideas and things in place to support that. So a good problem.
Yeah. Those are the problems that we want to have, and we hope that you have them too. Does your experience on the, I guess the only way I can think to put it, the traditional building side of things, does that inform a lot of your decisions here on what products you're developing, or even down to how you're developing these products? I mean, are you, in a sense, partially the customer that you're designing for, or are you taking more feedback in from the community? Because you said you're not taking more orders right now. So are you looking to today's more active builders then to kind of get a feel for what people want, or how are you making those decisions?
I think a lot of that is based on being in this industry in some way, shape, or form all my life.
Yeah.
I know that the inline industry is big, and that's growing from what I see and hear, but that's not an industry that interests me at all.
Right.
The side lock rifles, I try to stay true to existing designs. That the history is there. We know what certain envelopes, how they should look. So those are the guidelines that I stay to. Now, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that I'm going to put a lot of products out there, and then we'll let the people decide, what they like and what they don't like. That's I think I'm not quite sure how many. I have probably 15 or 18 original locks. I have, some really nice stuff that I just know, I have a really beautiful round-faced Germanic lock. I don't, maybe you sell 100 of them.
Yeah, right.
And then, I have a really nice full-size Ketlin lock. It's a beautiful lock, but there's several of those locks on the already, or avenues already on the market. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I don't really know. The Siler lock's been out there for a while.
Yeah.
And so I know, a lot of people are looking for something that maybe fits that bill but doesn't look like it. So every builder, myself included, has welded up a lock plate, or refiled a pan, or done something so that it sets it apart from the standard. So I think that having new products that are, I use this term loosely, but historically correct.
Right. Yeah.
They, I think it would be met and received very well.
Right.
And I hope they are, because like I said, we'll make whatever they want, and that's even the left-hand guys. There's always that, oh, that's great, but what about the left-hand guys? Well, we're going to run them if you can get enough people to make a run. We'll run them.
Yeah, you put your money where your mouth is on it, and let's
pretty
go.
much. Yeah. So, but no, I mean, I say it now. I mean, and I want to stay true to historical correctness. I do sometimes. I'm a bit surprised, at some of the knowledge that's out there. Many times on social media, people will say, "Well, you're CNCing the parts, and that's not how they were made." But yet these same people have no problem with a lock that's been made over the last 50 years, which was cast. Mm-hmm. And they weren't casting locks in the 18th century. They were hand forged out of wrought iron. So, it's like, well, we've already deviated from the process,
right?
From a hand forged lock to a cast lock versus a CNC milled lock. So, I don't. If we can use modern technology to recreate, historically correct appearance-wise lock, I'm all for it. It's and I think that you'll probably get no argument from a lot of the builders. It's a better product. And
I think that it seems in discussions online that all the discussion devolves into is a drawing of lines about what is or isn't.
Right.
But I feel that a lot of the folks having that discussion and asserting that it's not right or not appropriate, I'd say from what I can tell at least, their level of involvement is different than a lot of people that I see and read and kind of study what they're doing.
Right.
Which is fine, as you said, everybody has their thoughts on things, but I would agree with you on that we've opened the door in the last century that has changed a lot of these manufacturing processes. And I think as long as we're respectful to the original item, that we're good to go.
Yeah. I mean, I've forged barrels with my dad. I've forged probably 3 maybe complete locks, and it's I don't know, I'd have to talk to Brad and Shane. I don't know what a hand forged wrought iron barrel is going for these days. But I think the last time that I talked about it to anybody or whatnot, I think they were close to $8,000 for just a hand forged wrought iron. If you were to make a barrel using only 18th century practices, and that's hand forging the barrel from a flat piece, and and then hand boring it and hand rifling it and breeching it and then proofing it. It's about $8,000, and I think a lock, I think you're looking at $5,000 to $6,000. So, it's like, who I couldn't afford that.
Yeah, I couldn't either. You're in a prohibitive price bracket then that shrinks an already not large market.
Right. Exactly. So it's, so if you're using, like 3D CAD, and you're able to, recreate historically correct lines, I guess I'll use that word, the historically correct lines, and you can create a product that fits that envelope. It's like, and it's a superior product. It's not a cast part. You don't have to worry about porosity. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. And it's like, and it's only $45 more. That's a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm.
So, but there's going to be the traditionalists out there that want those. But I guess we have to be careful, because kind of like what you were saying earlier. But how much of a traditionalist really are you? Are you the guy that's got that hand forged barrel rifle and with a hand forged lock? And I have one that my dad made, and I think I paid $20,000 for it. And I had wanted one that he had built, and it came up of all places. It was on Gunbroker.
No way.
Yep. Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so I was able to it was never shot. He had sighted it in, and then the person that owned it, it was never shot. So it's like brand new.
Was it in another part of the country?
No.
Wow.
No. I bought two rifles that he built. Both are shotguns from the gun shop, but the first one is commercial lock and barrel. Now, when you say commercial lock and barrel, so they were buying the lock kits, those cast kits, and they would put the kits together, and then the barrels, they were I'm trying to think of the name of the company. They would buy the tubes milled. The outside was profiled.
Okay.
And they were bored. And then what they would do is they would ream them, and then they would rifle them, and then they would breech them. And so I was fortunate enough. I've got two guns that he built in the shop, but here, getting off track is that, if the guy says he's a traditionalist, well, then are you out there with a cast lock? I mean, one has to, where do you draw that line, I guess, is the question.
Yeah.
So, because, like we talked earlier, rice barrels, I think they're cut on a CNC machine.
Yeah. So. I had an interesting comment come through this week about barrels. And the assumption from the comment was that a smoothbore barrel should be cheaper to produce and cheaper to sell, because you don't have to cut the rifling. And it's one of those things that gets me thinking, because I kind of sort comments, is it something is this a teaching moment where I can point somebody to another resource or share something that I know, because I've talked to Jason quite a bit over the years. But it got me just thinking, like, is that true though for today? Because that machine time and that tool time of that machine in the cut costs what it costs.
Right.
is it costing more to bore out that larger hole on the CNC for a smooth bore versus the rifling? You know, is that more complicated for that computer to cut? And that's a great question, I think, that I'm going to ask Jason the next time I see him, because does that thought even work anymore with modern manufacturing?
That's a good question. That's a good question. So I'm not sure how. I would be curious to see what that answer is.
Yeah, it's just one of those head scratchers that, you know, like the, you know, what kind of traditionalist are you, I guess.
Right.
It's kind of a weird question, but it's one of those head scratchers that I think that as we keep an art form that's 2, 3, 4, 500 years old, alive, is it better to keep it alive, or is it better to make guns where the block and barrel are, you're getting close to 20 grand?
Yeah.
But I think it's important to still have that skill set and for people to keep that skill set alive. Absolutely. I don't want to get that misconstrued, but.
Right. No, I think you definitely want to keep the history and the technology, and then with anything, it's going to progress. They're going to find ways to make things faster, to make things better. And that's kind of what we're doing, but trying to keep that historical form, I guess is the best way to describe that.
You're not inventing, new styles of locks.
No, exactly. I mean, the only thing is, the tolerances are tighter and the materials are better. That's that type of stuff. It's on the 18th century, your internals, except for your springs, would have been wrought iron and case hardened. And today, I think even the cast locks, I think, are using tool steel. We're using a tool steel. We're using an 01, on our tumbler and in the sear. The bridles we are using 01. I can't speak for other locks. I can tell you locks that I've had in the past, modern, made locks, that the bridles were soft, and we are heat treating our bridles, so it gives you a little bit of a better surface, bearing surface or a mating surface. Okay. They're more of a spring temper, but they are heat treated. So just little things that to try to make it just a little bit better.
Do you see this as I suppose on the business end of this is your customer base, the experienced builders out there, or are you eventually going to start tapping into kind of the more, consumer is not the right realm, but like, I don't consider myself a builder. I'd like to learn to build more. I'd like to understand it more, but right now I'm kind of watching that space and just trying to learn. Is there ever a moment where you would say, we've got this running, now we're going to, go to the less experienced guys like me?
So a lot of it, based so far, the experience that I've seen with the lock that we do currently have, we sold a lot to the experienced builders, Brad Emig, Tim Williams, Alan Martin, Eric Kettenberg, just to name a few, Wallace Gusler and Ron Scott, and those were the ones that we seemed to see coming more. But then, later on, we still had some locks left over, and we kind of decided where are we going to take this? Where is this going to go? Yeah. And that's kind of where we've been over the last 5 years. We've kind of been kicking the can down the road and still been working on, developing new locks, just haven't done anything with them. But what we were seeing is that, enough of our locks were getting around, like enough people were seeing them. And so, we started to get, emails and, messages from Messenger and, hey, when are you going to do another round? And from people that were both builders but maybe, young builders like just starting out,
Yeah.
or people that were having a rifle built and wanted to use that. They saw our lock on a gun and they're like, you know what, I really like that lock and the quality and so it's kind of all over. It's not just one area.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Is it? I mean, I'm not trying to peer into the future here, but like, is it?
Sure.
Are you looking at this as locks, or are there other things like the folding sights and maybe other hardware that you would consider branching out into?
We're gonna grow.
Okay.
We're gonna grow it. And that's kind of what I said earlier is what we're gonna offer a lot of things.
Yeah.
We're gonna offer and we can stick with just the locks if the other stuff doesn't really interest people, or we can grow it and make more things. So there's machineries being bought and softwares being bought and products are being modeled. So yeah, there's a lot. Like I said, this is the goal that we've got for 2026,
mm-hmm.
and then 2027 we'll see where we go from there.
Yeah.
I don't have interest in doing barrels. We won't get that big.
Yeah.
Like we won't. The barrels are.
That's a whole other ball game.
That is it exactly. That's a whole other ball game.
Have any advice you'd give to somebody that was interested but hasn't really taken the dive yet?
Yeah, I mean it just all depends on your level of interest. And the CLA is probably a good start. There's so many. Not even just builders. I mean, even people that are knowledgeable and that could direct you into the right direction maybe for whatever level one may be at that particular point in their life. It's a lot of fun. I've a lot of people that I talk to that get started building. They usually build more than one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When I was working for another company and I wasn't working for myself, and I actually used to teach. I had 4 vices in my shop, and by word of mouth I would a couple of people that were friends, and maybe a friend knew a friend of a friend or whatever, and before I knew it, I was giving classes. I didn't charge anything. They could come and use my shop, and it was twice a week. And, it seems like there's more people that are interested than we really know about.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of grows. It's and a lot of people like, where do you go? That's part of the question that you asked is like, where. If you don't, I know Brad Emming, he puts on some classes and so he advertises. And so that's a good resource for people. But, if you don't know of those people, it's a good question. Where would one go? And so, that's why I would say that the CLA, I think there's a list of builders and people can look up, is there anybody in my area and get in touch and make contact and then grow, to whatever level an individual wants to get involved.
Do you still have the first gun you ever built?
I don't.
You don't?
No.
Did you like it when you finished?
I did. I was probably a typical teenager. It was a 58 caliber Virginia rifle, and it signed John Laubach and Son. Oh, wow. And I remember the gun like it was yesterday, but I have no idea where that gun is today.
Huh.
And it had some whoopses here and there, but that's for a 14-year-old kid, that's expected. But it was a pretty nice piece overall, and I think I sold it when I was like 17 to buy a car.
Uh-huh. What kind of car?
It was a truck, a 4-wheel drive pickup truck.
Okay.
And
are you a Ford or you a Chevy GMC guy? I need the details, Chris.
I have a Dodge
Okay.
Ram.
Okay.
but this one was a Nissan. It was
Okay.
I think it was a 4-wheel drive Nissan pickup truck. But you just you look back on some of that stuff and it's like, yeah, I wish I would have been smarter. But at the time, that wasn't my priority. So
Yeah.
And my dad was alive, and I'm like, you know what, I can build another one.
Uh-huh.
So that's but I think we've all been there at some point in our life.
Yeah. I like asking that. My father's always been an advocate of keeping your first. And I've listened at times than I haven't at other times. And it's a discussion that I have with builders a lot. And I like asking. So thank you. My next question in that vein would be, what would be a good first project for somebody interested in looking to build something or interested in muzzleloading? Would you advise them to jump in and take a class on building from a blank, or is there a different route, starting with something smaller? Or?
I guess that depends on the person's level, of skill.
Yeah.
And I've had in the classes that I've taught, I've had guys that were tool and die makers, and I've had guys that worked in IT, just everybody has their own skill level. And that's probably the biggest thing that I would, base it off of. If, I'll tell you a little story. I had to laugh. So one of the guys that I had coming to a class, he was a tool and die maker. And so he brought his tools, he brought his toolbox, and he opens it up. And the first thing he gets out is a pair of calipers, dial calipers. And he sets them up. And I looked at him and I said, well, the first thing you can do with those is you can take those home with you and don't bring them back. So, I mean, I use calipers every day in my day, when I was a product development engineer, but building muzzleloaders, that's not we don't need those.
Right. So, we're going to scratch this itch a different way.
Right. So,
yeah.
But, everybody has a different level, and, there's different avenues, there's different kits, there's different, however, somebody, whatever level they feel that they're at, I would definitely, say get involved. I would definitely say start and, and let it grow, with every new build. My son just, last year he started and he started with a kit from Brad and Shane, and it was enough that was done, and then there was enough that wasn't done. So it was perfect for him. And, now he has probably 6 builds sitting there that, are ready to go. So,
I love to hear that. That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's, and that's why it's kind of a bug. You either love it or you hate it. And probably 99% of the people that I've had the pleasure of teaching, they go on to build more. And so, I would certainly recommend, finding somebody in the area that's something, wherever you live, and take it on. Don't be afraid. It's you can always build another one.
You talked about having a kind of a wide variety of people in with your classes. What do you think drew people to this? Of these different backgrounds. Were you in Pennsylvania at that time?
Yes.
Was Pennsylvania's history a big part of that, or was it something else?
I think some of them, it was the age. They Fez Parker and that group. Some of those guys were older, and then there's a younger group, and the younger group, I see. So here in Pennsylvania, we have a lot of the clubs. The one in Harrisburg has a winter league. It's open to the public, and it's a woods walk, and that's probably one of the biggest draws that I see with a lot of the younger crowds. They come out and a lot of times they'll come out with, with the Thompson Centers or the CVAs and a lot of them, they're learning, so they get a lot of, flash in the pans or the lock doesn't spark. And, what I've found is that with the majority of the people in our group, in our industry are more than willing, to help in any way, shape or form for the most part. And so there's always people willing to help and it just seems to grow from that. There seems to be, maybe there's an interest, but you don't really know much. And then you go to a shoot and then you meet these people and a lot of them are really easy to get along with. And of course, sometimes that, you get to, there's a group of us that go and we're always riding one another when you miss a shot or something, and, so there's always that side of it as well. And so it's just a lot of fun and it just grows from there. But that's, the local woodblocks and shoots and stuff seem to be pretty. I think the one local club here in Columbia, the one shoot, we had over 100 people.
Oh my gosh.
It was maybe not that many. It was a lot. It was a lot. But there was a time where there was not a huge amount of interest. It kind of was dying off, and I don't necessarily know that it's booming or growing, but I do see a lot more people, a lot of more younger faces showing up at these shoots, which is good because it's always a concern. You don't want to see it die out. So
yeah, especially when you're starting a business in it.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a lot of fun and hope to do everything that I can to help it grow.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, Chris, where can people find your work and follow along? We've been talking about what you're doing and where can people go to see it?
So right now we're big on social media. We have a page on Facebook. It's Williamsburg Forge on Facebook and also on Instagram. We have a Williamsburg Forge page. We do have a website that is under construction. I'm hopeful that by the end of this month to have the website functional. It may just be to a point where there's just a picture, there's nothing really, it would be for information purposes that, until we would be able to start taking orders, but at least people would be able to see what's coming. But we've been really big and, on Facebook and Instagram, posting stuff probably weekly, to keep people up to date, as to what's going on or what we have. We do have some other things that we're working on that are not muzzleloading related. They're knives, but that's, so if people see that on there as well, they'll know, what's going on there as well.
Those are really neat though, because you're working on those kind of 18th century folding knives. Is that right?
Yep. We have, there's a copy, Eric, who is a curator for Colonial Williamsburg. He's a friend of ours. And I had built a folding knife and he's like, he said, I actually own one, an original. And so when I was down visiting my parents in Williamsburg, he reached out and I ran over and he allowed me to take photographs and he actually had a drawing created many years ago. So he gave me a copy of the drawing and I basically made, a run of them. So, it's a copy of an English, 1740s folding pocket knife. And, we've kind of done some different iterations. We've done some with Damascus blades and we've done some where, we milled dovetailed slots in them and dovetailed in pieces of wood and just different things to change it up a little bit.
I can't believe I didn't ask about that sooner in our talk. Sorry about that. I love those. My father's made a couple and they're just fascinating to see come together because of just how they work.
Yeah, they're really neat. That's they've been a big seller. We've actually and that's also a part that we have utilized modern technology. We have the hand to scales. We had those. We modeled the original. Well, the one that we're building, we modeled it in CAD, and then I used a local. A friend of ours actually has a business that does laser cutting. So I had the handles lasered, and then the CNC guy actually cut the chamfer, the dovetail. I'm sorry, the chamfer all the way around it.
Oh, okay.
And so that helps with cutting some of the time down to build them. There's still a lot. I mean, we still have to grind the blades and do the heat treating and fitting and final sanding and things like that. But it does cut down on a lot of the work that needs to be done. So that's pretty helpful. But we've had some local shops that are interested in some more modern knives that we're have agreed to do a run. So some of the other things like that people might see, and one of those is a copy of a folder. It was a K-bar that has a swing guard on it. That seems to be a really, really big one. We're actually in the process of trying to figure out how to bend that swing guard that attaches to the blade. So, but all that stuff is on social media, but for the most part, it's the locks and the 18th century stuff that we're moving the direction in. Is
there anything that you didn't get a chance to bring up that I didn't get
to?
No,
I think we've touched on everything, and like I said, there's more to come. We'll when we get to that point, we'll have another conversation.
Absolutely, yeah. If this wasn't too painful for you, I'd love to have you back.
Oh no, it was great. It was great. I said to my wife, I said, "Well, I've never done this, so we'll see how it goes." And it's been interesting. But she's been pushing this, like putting up videos and stuff like that. So she's been great. But there's lots of work and lots of things that we're going to be working to bring out, and lots of good stuff.
Fantastic. Good stuff. I'm excited to see. It's an exciting time, and I'm watching eagerly. I can't wait to have some project time to throw some of your parts on.
Yeah. That's we're really excited. Like I said, the next 3 locks are probably what most people would be interested, in purchasing, from a stylistic standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
The 1740s is a nice lock, and it certainly, fills a build, but it's just a really early piece, and it's a small piece of the market. So hopefully with the next 3 locks, we'll be able to grab much more of the market share. So.
Yeah. In closing here, I'd like to thank Chris again for coming on the program. It's really neat seeing somebody smart and kind has grown up in this community and has always been a part of it, working to take the leap of faith, really, hedge more bets on it, but in a manner that I think is giving back and supporting the community quite a bit. Really enjoyed hearing how Chris's brain worked and how he's worked to translate these 18th century, these historical crafts into modern manufacturing. It's neat stuff. It's always going to scratch an itch for me, so I hope you enjoyed it as well. Once again, I'm Ethan. I love muzzleloading. Thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next time.